Good morning to everyone and a very warm welcome to you all. We're very much delighted to host today's information session on the Explorers Mindset program, which is something we're really chuffed about, to be honest. My name's Jeremy Painter. I know many of you on the call, but just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a consulting partner at Generator Talent Group, and along with Marcus Waters and Glenn Peterson, who you'll meet during the course of today's session, I've been involved in the design and development of this program, as well as co-facilitating it with the Warehouse Group for the first, I guess, inaugural program, which has been run at the back end of 2022 and start of this year. So I'm not sure if Richard Parker's on the call, but if he is, a call out to Richard, who's the Chief People Officer at the Warehouse Group. Richard, thank you for your courage and conviction to provide this program and be the first to do that for your leadership group. We've thoroughly enjoyed working with you. So the objective of today is to share an overview of the program, just to give you a heads up, I guess, and some of the key elements. There'll also be a section with a couple of the alumni, and we'll be looking to kind of hear from them what their experience has been like and having gone through this program as a cohort. And then also we have one of New Zealand's foremost modern day explorers who will share some of her adventures and stories, as well as some of the attributes she values as an explorer that we think also resonate through this program. So just a couple of heads up before we kick things off. First of all, we will be recording this session, so we'll be able to share it with people after today. There will be ample time for Q&A at the end, so please either drop a note in the Q&A tab or just hold it on until the end, and you can ask that question. And I think what we might do is just ask for those who are not presenting, if you could perhaps just turn off your screen, your camera, just so it makes it a little easier for the presenters to see each other for the remainder of the presentation. We can flick those back on when we have the Q&A session. So I'd like to introduce Marcus Waters. Marcus, good to have you along. Marcus represents Antarctic Heritage Trust, who is our equal partner in this program. And Marcus, as well as being an explorer himself, was really someone who had the genesis of this idea and we kind of started it at the start line with us. So Marcus, I just want to hand over to you to talk about that and the role that the Heritage Trust play in this program.
Great, thank you, Jeremy, and kia ora koutou, everyone. Yeah, my name is Marcus Waters. I'm the Antarctic Heritage Trust ambassador and representative on this program, and I did work for the trust as an employee, as the general manager of commercial and partnerships for a couple of years. So the Antarctic Heritage Trust over the last 30 years has conserved the amazing early explorer bases in Antarctica. So those are the two Captain Robert Falcon Scott bases, the Ernest Shackleton base there, and actually the photograph you can see here, the little known Karsten Borchgrevink base as well, which is actually the very first building to be erected in Antarctica. So over the last 30 years, this amazing preservation project has unfolded to the point where these bases are now preserved for the future. And in working for the trust, it struck me that not only were the preservation of these historic buildings and monuments important, but the actual preservation of the legacies, and in particular the leadership legacies of these people, was equally important. And not only that, but the messages and the lessons in there were just as relevant to today's leaders as they were in the early exploration of Antarctica. When you think about the challenges that they faced, when you think about the leading of a group of people in the world's most hostile environment. So this genesis of an idea came to me, and I thought, look, there's a leadership piece in this for today's leaders. And I've got a background in human resource management as well. Worked for 20 years in human resource and training and development management, and looked out for a partner that could actually bring this vision to life, to actually turn this genesis of an idea into a program that would actually connect with today's executive and management leaders. And I knew of Glenn and I knew of Jeremy through Generated Talent, having done a little bit of work with them previously. And I knew they had the vision and the foresight to actually engage with this concept, and was very pleased over the course of many months of sort of discussion and evolving that Glenn and Jeremy took this idea forth and have designed this program that is fundamentally about taking these amazing lessons from the past and making them relevant for today's leaders. And I guess my fundamental pitch to Glenn and Jeremy was, look, every management team needs an explorer at the executive table, taking the organizations forward. That sense of curiosity, that sense of positive and managed risk taking, bringing a group of people forward to accomplish something that's really, really amazing. So that was the idea. And over the last 12 months or so, we've taken the program and run the inaugural program, which Glenn will be talking about very shortly. So that's a little bit about me. Yes, I'm an explorer myself. During the during the 2000s, I was part of a Kiwi team that did a number of world firsts. We did the very first sea kayak expedition in Antarctica, the first New Zealand crossing of Greenland ice cap, and first circumnavigation of South Georgia, amongst other things. So I guess this stuff is kind of ingrained. It's part of my DNA. I love it. And there's something about the reality of it. There's something about the authenticity of it, something about the excitement of it, that I think engages people and captivates people in a different way. And Glenn will talk about the sort of the experiential component that we hope businesses and companies engage in as well. So I'm on the call and very happy, of course, to answer questions later in the piece.
Thanks so much, Marcus. Great to have you along, and we really value the partnership with the Heritage Trust. Look, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Lydia. So Lydia Bradey, Lydia, let me give you a little bit of a run-in before you do your stuff. So Lydia is a mountaineer and mountain guide who lives down in Wanaka and Lake Hawea, in fact, and she's one of New Zealand's most accomplished living explorers. So in 1988, Lydia became the first woman in the world to climb Mt Everest without supplementary oxygen. And to date, she's the only New Zealander to have climbed Everest without oxygen and has climbed it 6 times. So just so everyone knows, Mount Everest is 8,848 meters high. She's also climbed a total of 10 ascents over 8,000 meters and about 35,000 over 6,000. She's spent a lot of time at the top of the world, as you can see. Lydia is passionate about mountaineering, about adventuring. She does ski guiding and international mountain guiding. And she is also, we really value her as a regular speaker at the Explorer Mindset program. So Lydia, over to you. Delighted to have you along. We look forward to you sharing some of your stories and some of what you value as attributes in a modern day explorer.
Good morning, Maureen, everybody. And thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for attending this little presentation. The brief I had is to discuss what is an explorer. And I always think that an explorer is somebody going towards new places and new discoveries. This doesn't have to be nature. It doesn't have to be out there in wild conditions, of course. When we think of an explorer as somebody who goes through deserts and big oceans and circumnavigates South Georgia, Marcus, and goes underwater and climbs big mountains. And so we celebrate those explorers. But of course, in modern day, there's fewer and fewer opportunities to do these wild things and technically explore as opposed to doing something that somebody else has done. However, the human body and the human mind and the human race is a really unique and powerful thing. And there will always be the opportunity for us to be explorers at a more, say, scientific level, at a more intellectual level, in different ways. And we have to explore these boundaries because we have evolved, I truly believe, to be machines to develop, to respond to the unexpected and the unknown. So at a micro level, an explorer could be a chemist, a scientist, a rock climber doing a new climb, a gymnast doing some new moves, an environmentalist trying to deal with what you do with plastic waste. We just have to change what we think is an explorer and identify it's somebody pushing the boundaries in whichever area we wish. The common thing is that there is an uncertain outcome, which sometimes we call it a risk, but not necessarily. And it's important to recognize the bravery of people who do this, because we are classically really good as humans at criticizing those people who fail. But as some scientists might say, you don't fail, you find out what doesn't work. And the way that you would make this distinction quite obvious, if you like, is through, I believe, is through preparation. So you're really, really prepared. For example, you're going to climb a mountain, you're going to kayak around South Georgia, which is really remote and extreme. Then you do tons of prep. And then if you fail, it's not because you were silly necessarily. It's because you were dealing with something that was really big and unknown. I was going to not turn the page. I was going to. So how to explore successfully, in my belief, is through a lot of preparation, through a lot of training, and through a reasonable amount of research, through a belief, which is your conviction, and through engagement, which aligns with your curiosity, and through teamwork, which is your loyalty. So these are the 6 brands or the 6 concepts that, 3 of the 6 concepts that we have in the Explorer's Mindset Leadership Model, and I've verbalized them a little bit in different ways. So one of the things an explorer does, I believe, or if you want to explore successfully and have joy in exploring, or have joy in experimenting, or have joy in moving forward in the job that you do or the life that you live, is move towards a goal, but don't seek only that goal. So you'll seek the experience of moving towards that goal is what you gain from. The journey towards the outcome is what enriches you, and from what you learn from. And this is the path. So there's this very famous and unfortunately dead extreme alpinist, a Slovenian extreme alpinist called František Niers, and he wrote this great quote. I love it. It goes, "There are tempting goals. Yet when you reach your goal, you often remain empty-handed. The goal is just the inspiration, the path, its own purpose. It's important to believe in your path, and that's your conviction." In neuroscience, we now know that every time that you do something new, every time you write a presentation that you've never done before, or you go and do a 10K run when you've never run before, or you learn something, or you study something, or you overcome a fear and you go and do a public presentation, everything of those new things creates new connections in your brain. So you technically and fundamentally become more intelligent. I'm quite a big fan of intelligence. I love gravitating towards people who are intelligent. I like to think that I've got a reasonable brain, but I use it quite well. It's not reasonably super smart, it's just that I use it. And by adding new and exploratory things to your everyday life, I'll explore doing some exercise before I go to work. I'll explore standing up in front of a bunch of people and doing a really good presentation. You strengthen your brain. You become a stronger person, and a stronger person can is more resilient and can take more risks and has more courage and basically has a richer life. So, you know, the attributes of an explorer. If we go through our mindset leadership model, curiosity is also engagement. An amazing photographer has supreme engagement with her or his environment. Is it an insect? Is it a wave? Is it a sky? Is it a person in a street? Is it somebody who is sleeping on the street? They engage with their environment. And you cannot be curious if you do not engage. And you cannot learn if you are not curious. And curiosity also requires, or perhaps curiosity stimulates the imagination, the big question of what if. So if you're in a management role, you might go, well, this is good, but it's not very smooth. It's not very smooth how we transition from this to the end result. Curiosity will drive the imagination, which will drive the desire to explore different pathways to that goal, the pathway to the goal. For me, lots of people asked me when I first did Mount Everest why I climbed it. And fundamentally, Marcus also will relate. You know, we do things out of curiosity, and we do things because we've gained a certain amount of skill, and then we kind of go, well, what if? And what would it be like? And it's just like that as a child sitting around listening to a book. I remember sitting at 7,300 meters on the side of Mount Everest, and I had gone to 8,000 meters the year before without oxygen. And I was looking up at Mount Everest at about, say, 8,500 meters, where it actually gets really, really hard to breathe without oxygen, and just burning with curiosity, because altitude is invisible. So I was looking at the snow slope going, well, I can walk on the snow slope. And I know a mountain that looks like that because there's thousands of them in New Zealand. And that's not what I'm curious about. I'm curious about this invisible thing. What is it going to be like? Can I deal with it? So curiosity was a big thing that drove me on my first ascent of Everest. Can I do it? Conviction and belief in your enterprise, the value of the project. I believe that anything in big nature is so rewarding, and that's not just like puffy up chest gold medal at the Olympics kind of thing. Well, you don't, or a certificate, or a Nobel Prize, or let's say I've got an ONZM, you know, the letters after my name of Officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit. It's not that. It's anything in big nature teaches you so much that every time you come away, even if it's just a day walk, you have had another experience, and that goes into the resource box. So when we work in an office or as a team, we don't necessarily engage big nature, but perhaps we need to do things that bring it in, like a respectful nature. So we try to be as green as we can in our office. A respect for an engagement for what we do as individuals. So we might engage in nature outside. We may be outside in some of our life, and we bring that fortified human back into the workplace. Because this engagement with nature will help us be healthy, and it drives away depression. We know we have developed as animals to be humans that live in nature. There are lots of parts of the brain that are stimulated only by being in nature and uneven ground. It's very deep in the brain, but it's also connected to the part that controls depression. Interesting enough. I'm a physio as well, so I'm kind of interested in neuroscience. It's up to you to choose to believe. And I'm just going to refer to a couple of notes. Ideally, the path isn't one completely oriented to selfish gain, because that just isn't nutritious enough, or you might come unstuck in other ways, you know, like selfish gain is awesome, but it's just not enough if you're on the mountains. Selfish gain to be the first woman to climb Mount Everest without oxygen is a really good motivating factor. It gets me up in the morning, but it doesn't keep me alive. Keeping me alive, the belief in my enterprise, of the love of nature, the curiosity, the drive, the preparation, that keeps me alive. Conviction is enhanced by preparation and planning. And you have safety nets, and you have the ability to turn around, which is a key thing that explorers need to do. Flexibility and adaptability are really keen. A conviction that unnecessary risks are not taken. And this comes into risk taking, it comes into loyalty as well, because you are working as a team. So if you are prepared as a team climbing in the mountains, and somebody takes really unnecessary risks, it's dangerous enough in the mountains. Or let's say maybe it's not so dangerous. The outcome, the chance of success is lessened by people taking unnecessary risks at the other end. An unnecessary risk would be lazy with your safety and tying onto the mountain. Whereas if we were really good, if Marcus and I were climbing together, for example, we would both be really good with our snow anchors, or our mountain anchors, or our rock anchors, which is how we tie ourselves to the mountains. And then it would be the unknown part, the weather perhaps, or the conditions, or the just pushing a little bit of risk out the top end. And that's where we would save our risk for, because you don't want to put risk down lower. I'm not going to get my team convinced in the validity of our cause if I take unnecessary risks at the bottom end. It's boring. That's key too. Boringness, and we should have that. Anti-boringness should be one of those key parts of the leadership model. So if I touch on loyalty, I think it's shared values. And you know how sometimes you end up talking to people, whether it's in a bar or a mountain hut, and you're talking to people and they're actually, they're in the mountain hut, but they have a totally different life to you and really, really different background, yet you are connected in some way. And sometimes you end up talking to people who do exactly what you do and you've got nothing in common. I mean, we have those chemistry things, and that's basically about shared values. So if you want to make a team cohesive, or even if that team is just 2 people, you need to have shared values. You need to have shared agendas and shared energy outputs. When I was young, I remember the famous Rob Hall of Mount Everest fame, Mount Everest movie fame, one might say, saying to me once, when we're on expeditions, you always hang out with the groovy team. And I go, I don't. But I quite liked the groovy team. Often the groovy team were just sort of like random hardcore Slovenian climbers, or people who were really motivated. And it didn't matter. And when I started tramping and climbing, I was really, really a bumbly and a really, really beginner, and I couldn't walk very strongly and everything like that. But what I did in everything is I brought positive energy to the team, and I did what I could, lots of it. So if I'm climbing with really good climbers, much better than me, I'll be the one that melts the water. I'll be one that gets the snow in to melt in a high mountain camp. I'm the one that does more of the chores so that I bring my energies at the level that I can contribute to the team. And I'll be organized and prepared most of the time. Yeah, and we're not perfect, right? And in that loyalty, you must bring respect. And if people think differently to you, it's always been a lesson for me. If people think differently, and they might actually have a really good explorer mindset. They may be thinking of a different approach to that problem. And instead of dissing them, you might go, well, there might be something valid in that. So respect is key to your loyalty, and it's key to conviction in your outcome, is that we all bring values, different values, but that we can share to the team. I'd like to go into resilience. Now, I've got only a couple of minutes left. Is that people happy at the moment, Jeremy?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, couple more
Okay,
minutes.
cool. Couple more minutes. So resilience is the big new word, and this, just to summarize it really quickly, resilience is the ability to return to the state of being after you've been compressed. That's materialistically. There is a proactive meaning to resilience. So reactive is returning to where you were, bouncing back quickly. Proactive is achieving a goal with limited resources. That is another meaning to resilience. However, resilience leads on to a term that was coined first by Nassim Taleb in 2012 called anti-fragility. And where resilience means responding, bouncing back to where you were, anti-fragility is gaining and growing after after something that has happened to you, or after an obstacle, or after a project, or something that you've had to deal with. So anti-fragility, the ability to grow and respond, or respond and grow, is a great new term that is a much more positive, that we actually strengthen our brain, we strengthen our ability to be courageous, and we strengthen our resilience by growing stronger. And a part of that is the anti-blame culture, and that is taking self-responsibility for your actions. And if you take self-responsibility for your actions, then if it's you say it's my responsibility for the bad things that happen to me, then you can be responsible for the good things that happen to you as well, which means you are more empowered. Courage comes from risk-taking. Courage comes from self-responsibility. Courage comes from preparation. So in summary, we as individuals, as teams, and as humans, we highly benefit to preserve as humans and to develop an explorer's mindset as individuals and in the human race. And I think today's leaders need an explorer at their head, but you also need to be your own explorers in order to go forward. Life wouldn't be amazing if it didn't embrace the unknown. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Great to have you with us this morning. And Lydia is a regular part of our Explorers Mindset program. And sorry, we only had limited time for you this morning, Lydia, but to come to the program, you'll hear a lot more of Lydia. I'd like to spend a bit of time now just talking about the program and giving you a sense of what the program's about. And when we first set off to work on this program with Marcus, as he talked about earlier, we're really focused on nurturing the spirit of these explorers that come from what's called the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, which is from about the late 1800s through to about 1922. And after that stage, the mechanics and machines became part of Antarctic exploration. So the heroic age were these people setting off into the unknown and doing some incredible feats in very inhospitable conditions. But look, they're not the only explorers in the world. In fact, the modern world, as we know it, wouldn't exist without man's and women's desire to explore. And when James Cook discovered the ice packs in the Antarctic in the late 1700s, that was an unparalleled event. Yet, 600 years earlier, the legendary Coupe used stars and currents to navigate his waka to discover New Zealand. So there's always been this history of exploration. It's imbued in mankind. But the program we're talking about here really does focus on the Antarctic explorers, because we've developed it in conjunction with the Antarctic Heritage Trust. And so our focus is around this particular era of exploration. And so we spent quite a bit of time actually during COVID working with Marcus and conceiving this program and starting to design the elements that we have been able to run with the Warehouse Group. And look, the key question we really wanted to ask ourselves is, what could we learn? What could we learn from these long dead white male explorers of the past? What relevance might they have in terms of their approach to leadership that could pay dividends today? And that was our hypothesis that we sought to prove, that perhaps there was something in these events, these people, the histories and the stories of leadership that we could apply to today. And why the Antarctic? Well, it's really a unique situation. That at that stage, that was the only undiscovered part of the world. It was the great unknown in some ways. And during that period of time, there's been lots of books, very, very well researched stories of these expeditions. It was also at a time where people kept journals and diaries. And so not only these great explorers like Ernest Shackleton and Robert Scott and Roald Amundsen kept their own diaries of these events, but also people on their teams would write their own diary and have a different perspective about what was going on in these expeditions. So there's this very rich record, written record of what actually occurred in these events. And so one can actually not just go in and understand more about the expedition itself and the events and the circumstances, but you also get a rich insight into the human relationships and the human condition of people exploring in these incredibly challenging times. And you get a sense into their mindsets and into how they thought about leadership and their judgments and decision making. And in circumstances that range from being incredibly triumphant to very tragic. And so one can come away with a really a deeper understanding of these legends. And what we were seeking to do was understand whether we could bring some of these timeless lessons of leadership and perseverance and endurance into today's world, and would they make sense? Would they resonate with leaders today? And could those timeless lessons be applied in very different but yet still quite challenging circumstances that we face today? And so that's what we built the program on, the hypothesis that yes, these things could be relevant, and the lessons of leadership that these great explorers left with us could be made relevant today. And so we started to develop this model, and Lydia talked about some of the 6 attributes of the leadership model. So we came up with 6 attributes which we think define the leadership approach of those great explorers. And I'll just talk briefly about each one of those. So the first one is curiosity, and Lydia talked about curiosity in her presentation. So we really do deeply believe that the starting point is having a curious mind, a mindset to think beyond the horizon, and perhaps even lead others into what might be perceived as the unknown. This notion of conviction, that you have to have conviction towards a purpose, a set of goals, and some view about success. The third attribute we discovered was loyalty. And as Lydia said, none of these explorers were exploring on their own. They each had extensive teams of people going with them, staying at base camps, doing preparation. And the challenge for leaders in those times was to build a loyal, cohesive team, to build on the diversity and the respectively different skill sets that they have in their team. And so there's some great lessons about building loyalty amongst people in challenging situations that we can take from the Antarctic explorers. Lydia talked about resilience as well. And so we know that resilience is a fundamental part of the explorer's mindset, to be comfortable with vulnerability, to have the resilience when times are tough, to endure. And as Lydia said, perhaps even bounce back stronger from learning a lesson about a challenging situation. The next dimension was risk-taking. That none of these adventures would have got off the ground without some sort of risk. But we're not talking about crazy risks, as Lydia talked about. It's more about these calculated risks, the willingness to sort of push forward, to make progress, to make decisions under pressure, to eliminate risk where you can, and to embrace the risk that comes with the exploring the new, to pushing out beyond boundaries of comfort. And then the last attribute that we came up with was courage, that again, none of these leaders would have made any progress without having personal courage. Confidence, optimism comes through very clearly from a lot of the readings as well. And so we built this model of the 6 attributes of these great explorers that we've built the program around. And for running the first inaugural workshop with the Warehouse Group, we really do believe that these attributes are relevant today, as relevant today perhaps as they were 100 years ago. And they can provide a really interesting framework for one to think about your leadership. And we also think they're a bit unconventional. It doesn't talk about results and commercial aspects. It's largely about the human condition and about the emotional side of leadership, and the leader's ability to understand the situation and to bring people with them through what can be sometimes challenging circumstances. So the program that we've been running we've built around these 4 stages effectively. And the first stage is what we call the foundation workshop or immersion, and that takes place in Christchurch. And so for 2 days in Christchurch, the cohort of people will spend those 2 days immersing themselves in Antarctic history. And why Christchurch? Well, Christchurch is one of the starting off places for Antarctic exploration. It's the place where a number of the famous explorers set off on their journeys more than 100 years ago. It's the place where many countries have their scientific base for exploring and developing Antarctic knowledge. And so there's this sort of almost like a little microcosm of Antarctica in Christchurch. And so we decided that the first 2 days of the program were spent in Christchurch with the cohort of people being immersed in the history and the stories. They go through a process of getting a 360 survey back against how they're tracking versus the attributes. We introduce them to the Antarctic Heritage Trust. We visit the Antarctic International Centre. We have dinner in the Canterbury Club in the room where both Shackleton and Scott were farewelled 100 years ago on their Antarctic expeditions. And so there's a real sort of rich history around Christchurch. And we found that in the first program, these 2 days were really fundamental in setting up the framework for the program and introducing the cohort into the key characters, the key stories, the expeditions that we drew so many lessons from. And so it's a great way to start the program. And people come away from those 2 days having not only a deep sense of connection to the stories and the people that will run the program around, but also a sense of where they see themselves as a leader and what they're willing to commit to in terms of their own leadership intentions and the journey that they'll undertake to further develop themselves into a more committed, compelling leader. We then follow the 2 days with a series of half-day modules. So 6 half-day modules built around the 6 attributes. So each half-day has a focus on a particular attribute. And each of those modules, we would bring in a guest speaker, people like Lydia. We bring in an explorer, an author, a published author, an academic, a naturalist, a philanthropist, and a medical doctor. And we ask each of those people to come in and bring their own perspective about that particular attribute, almost like an expert view, quite different to one that we might normally see day to day in a more corporate setting, to start to expand our mindsets around what might be possible when thinking about courage or loyalty or risk-taking or decision-making. And so we know that those sessions work really quite well, and we space those out so that the participants in the program have a chance to put into practice some of the learnings and lessons from each of those particular attributes as they go through them. The third stage is a really interesting thing that we've added to the program, which we think makes it unique. And that is that as a cohort, each group will decide to do some type of expedition themselves. And the idea here is that within a group of people who might come through the program, there will be a wide range of mental and physical attributes to undertake an expedition. And so we leave it up to the cohort to figure out what do they think they're capable of doing that was going to become a sort of a physically and mentally challenging experience for them. And that could be, for some people, it might be sleeping outside in a tent for the first time. For others, it might be right up the other end. I want to go to Antarctica. I want to go to base camp at Everest, or something in between that. And so each cohort needs to decide what it can do some months in the future. And the goal is to have the whole cohort finish that expedition together, to be involved in the planning and the execution of some expedition. Now, for the warehouse group, they have decided that they as a group will cross the South Island of New Zealand. So over 3 days in October, the first group that we've had through the program will be cycling, hiking, and rafting their way across the South Island of New Zealand as a group. They'll be crossing over Arthur's Pass. They'll be having a very long day hiking, about 12 or 13 hours hiking across Arthur's Pass. And they are busy at the moment planning and training for that expedition. It's not happening till October because we have to wait for the snow to melt across Arthur's Pass, but I know the Warehouse Group themselves have taken on something that's quite challenging. And I know within the group, the range of people on that program, we have emotions that range from pure excitement and joy to trepidation. But the goal for the group is to figure out how those 12 people will go from one side of New Zealand to the other in 3 days, with some assistance from an adventure guide. And how does that group get everybody through that expedition safely and successfully over those 3 days? And so the last phase, or this third phase of the program, is about taking some of the lessons, perhaps the inspiration, the approaches, the leadership techniques from the early explorers, and putting them into practice in a real life experiential situation today. We think that's a really great way of embedding in some of the learning and some of the insights and creating a really incredibly memorable and significant event in each person's leadership journey. The last stage of the program finishes with a classroom session where we do a wrap up. We have a celebratory dinner, and that caps out the program, which in some cases may take 6 to 9 months to go through those 4 phases, depending on what expedition is undertaken and when that might occur. So we think we've got a really interesting program. The expedition makes the program unique in our mind. It's very exciting, and while we haven't had the first group through the expedition yet, we're actually going to hear very soon from a couple of people on that alumni experience on the program so far. So let me hand over to you, Jeremy, and I'll leave it with you and Sarah and Sam to talk.
Thanks so much, Glenn, and thanks for stepping us through that super fast timing. You did a fantastic job. Thank you. So I'm delighted to have Sam and Sarah on today's session. Thoroughly enjoyed the journey we've been on with you two as cohort, and Glenn and I facilitating. And really, we wanted them to be able to share a little bit about their experience and what they may have noticed and what they've been through over the course of the duration of the program, which is around 9 months or so. So Sarah is the area chapter lead for the market. Many of you might know of the market, and she's been involved in that business proposition from the start. And Sam is a chapter area lead for corporate development and ways of working at the warehouse. So guys, thanks for coming along. I wanted to just sort of start out, perhaps Sam, you could start, and maybe Sarah, you could tag on, just sort of answer that first question. When you first saw the course, what was it or the program, what was it that appealed to you, and potentially why was it that you wanted to do this?
Well, Sam's frozen. I'll take his spot, shall I?
Yes.
So thanks for having us on, Jeremy. Look, I remember first receiving this beautiful brochure of this program from our CEO, saying that I'd been selected as one of 12 people in our organisation to go on this program. And I just remember reading through this and feeling incredibly grateful, proud, and overall excited about this opportunity. This was a leadership course that looked like no other I'd ever seen. It had the ingredients of a traditional leadership course with these learning modules, but it also had this methodology of applying this learning around the discovery of Antarctic explorers and over an 8-month period, while simultaneously we'd be training mentally and physically to complete this huge expedition at the end, this coast to coast over 3 days. So this was a leadership program to me that screamed challenge and adventure, and I was just all about it. I was definitely not in the trepidation bucket. I'm all for it. I think in the blurb about the coast to coast, it said something like, "You'll start in the Tasman Sea." So, you know, that had me, those few words. But genuinely, this felt like a serious long-term investment in me, and also a reward as a leader in our organisation. So, yeah, very excited. I'll hand over to you, Sam.
Yeah, sorry, apologies, I just dropped out for a second there. I mean, to echo some of the sentiment that Sarah just shared, for me, you know, when it was pitched around the opportunity to cross the South Island, hike, bike, raft, and work was going to pay for it, I mean, that was enough for it in itself. But if you know, the way I describe this program to people is that this is a case study in leadership, but, you know, using Antarctic exploration. And I think that's an area that, you know, being a bit of a history nerd to some degree, also sparked an interest. But also, you know, the investment and leadership for me was really important, just where I'm at with my journey. So yeah, huge appeal. I'd say, like, you know, if you ask me now, like, why should this appeal to people, I think it is more anchored in the model that you know, Jeremy, Glenn, Marcus have come up with here around these 6 components of leadership. Is often when I've been on leadership courses and before, the topic is leadership, and to break it down into those 6 components gave something to more work with, when it was like, hey, I'm quite good at this component, but I'm really lacking in another, and that's just helped me, call it, you know, weight my investment in different aspects of leadership, and I've found that really invaluable.
Yeah, and so guys, just following on from your lead there, Sam, what are the potential what are some of the changes you may have made to the way you lead or the way you think about leading as a result of this experience?
Well, I mean, the nice thing, like the way that the course is structured, is you do spend a whole session on one of those components. So, you know, we will have a full session committed to conviction or curiosity, and the one that I'll talk about is the loyalty one. For me, what I've learned about myself through this program is I'm hyper rational. And so, you know, the way I will approach difficult conversations, when I say difficult, like that could be, you know, the vision for the team or performance management, whatever it might be, is I approach them from a real rational space. What I've learned about loyalty through this program is loyalty is driven by emotion. And that's something that I really need to work on. So actively working on storytelling, narrative building, to more appeal to emotion than just reason. And you know, as recent as a few weeks ago, we materially shifted the way that my team supports the business, and that has, you know, that's really challenged people's sense of value, because you know, we've broken, call it, the way that people see or perceive their value in the business. That has caused a little bit of pain, and could I have done a better job of that through better storytelling, building narratives? Absolutely. And I think that's the journey I'm on, is that balance between reason and emotion as a leader to drive. So it's better awareness from my perspective of where I call it, like, some of my biases and things that I need to work on.
Nice.
How about you, Sarah? Any particular ones stand out?
Look, I think there was so much in this program, and it was actually a nice opportunity being invited to speak today to trawl back through some of the reflections that I had on each of the sessions, and I think that's something that I will do regularly throughout my career, because I think there's so many little nuggets there that really are quite applicable in everyday environment. I think there's a few things that stood out for me. And that's when talking about courage. I know Marcus Waters from the Antarctic Heritage Trust, who we heard from again today, talked to us about this, and about optimism being true moral courage, but that optimism must be founded in confidence. And we were taking our team through a lot of change at the time that we were doing this this program, and it really helped me realize that I had work to do on my own conviction and go on my own journey and understand the reasons for those changes in order to show up to my team with that honest optimism. So that's just one example, I guess, of something that I came out and was immediately able to apply. And I think the other one around, you talked to Sam about loyalty being emotional. It also creates psychological safety, which drives performance. And we learned through this program that loyalty is the level of a person's devotion to another person, but it's also to a group or an ideal or duty or a cause. And I realized through this big change that we were going through that while I might have good, strong loyalty with my team, or my team had with me, I knew that I needed to pivot in the way that I lead to build out loyalty to a new group and new duties and causes for my team. So really, I think the way that this program is put together, where you go through 360-degree feedback from your peers, you gain an understanding of you, you've got these leadership principles, the applied understanding how when they relate to, think about how they relate to the Antarctic explorers that you're learning about. It allows you to weave and make these connections that you can apply immediately to your leadership journey. So really thankful for the support through quite a tricky period to be on this program.
Thanks so much, Sarah and Sam, for being so articulate and succinct. Really great to hear. I think just before we move on to a Q&A, what would your advice be to anyone who is potentially thinking about, potentially doing this program? What would you say to them,
Oh, I think
Start training.
What's that? Sorry, start training.
Start training.
Get on your bike. Look, I would say go all in and deep dive in the content and get curious. One of the beautiful things about this program was just how open and vulnerable everyone was, and they were fully engaged. And I think that was because of the quality of the content from the beginning, and the introduction that we had in Christchurch, the weaving of the history of those explorers. No one was an expert in Antarctic explorers when we started, so it really created this environment where all participants were equal. We were all learning something from new, and therefore felt comfortable to be vulnerable. And so get curious and start to do what we did and started listening to podcasts about Shackleton and going to the movies, and it actually made for such a stronger connection to the program, the principles, and to each other. So I really feel like this is a program that has the beautiful ingredients to form an amazing team building experience. I'd say try to do it at a time where there's fewer distractions across the business, so that those that are participating can do as much as possible in person, because those sessions were extra special, and ensure that the group are really motivated and take the opportunity to train together to really build out those relationships. I mean, that's been one of the most beautiful things about this program, is the work that we're doing behind the scenes. And this morning conversations about organising our next cycling trip from Ngaruawahia to Cambridge. So yeah, there's a lot to take out of it. But yeah, that would be my advice. What about you, Sam?
No, I think you've beautifully articulated it. I would just say, be prepared. Just to reiterate the vulnerability point is, be prepared to do quite a lengthy introspection of yourself and your leadership style. And then just be honest about those things and vulnerable with the team of them. And I think the way that Glenn and Jeremy set the stage for that was, we kicked off the course with spending, I think it was about half a day on who am I, and that was across the team, where we all shared to quite a deep level, which I think just actually set the foundation for then that open and honest conversation that Sarah was talking about. And it's not often that you get to reflect on those types of call it bigger questions, You know, I was up till, I think it was like midnight, just actually like, oh no, that's not quite right. That's not quite right. And so, you know, wanted to actually put the best foot forward when jumping in on this program and embarking on the journey with the team. So yeah, but also to Jeremy's point, like start training. This is quite an expedition.
Sarah and Sam, thank you so much for
You're welcome.
your contribution today. We're going to have some Q&A now, and people can ask anyone any question really. It might be someone from the cohort, it might be Glenn or myself. So if there's some questions, please fire away. And I think unless we've got them in the Q&A, if people just want to step in and ask a question on the call, that would be fine.
I have a question, probably Jeremy.
Yes.
How often do you anticipate that you would run these programs?
We are anticipating that it'll probably be 5 or 6 per year, we think. And depending on the expedition, and the sort of extent of that expedition, there are seasonal aspects that limit that. So you can only go over the Southern Alps at a certain time of the year when there's no snow. But we certainly have plans in place for a couple more programs at the back end of this year. And look, we're one program down, and we're also developing as we go, and so we're also open to how this may evolve. And so look, it's not going to be hundreds of programs; it'll be a handful, but certainly another couple, 2 or 3 before the year's out.
And what's your ideal group of cohort? How many people?
Well, in the warehouse group, cohort was 12, and that was excellent. Provided a level of intimacy, and essentially Glenn and I would co-facilitate all of those. It was great. I think you could probably add a couple more into that, and I think that's around about a good manageable number. If an organisation had more individuals they wanted to work through on it, we're open to co-creating how that might happen. But really, the kind of 4 stages are the kind of the way the program needs to evolve. But it could be flexed to accommodate more, but you'd lose some of the intimacy.
Thank you,
Jeremy. It might also be important to say that this program, we're designing it to run either in-house, as we've done with the warehouse group, or also as an open enrolment program where participants could come from a number of different organisations together and do the program, because we know some organisations won't be big enough to have a cohort of 12 people who want to go through it at once. So we're flexible on whether it's run as an in-house program or an open enrolment program with a mixture of people from different organisations.
You've just answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anticipated it. Any further questions that people would like to ask us? There's something on the chat there. I'll just check that. Just someone leaving. Yeah.
Okay, look, if there's no further questions, Glenn, is there anything else you would want to add, or Marcus?
No, nothing from me, Jeremy. Thanks. I just want to thank everyone for participating, and thank our alumni, Sam and Sarah and Lydia and Marcus, for coming along and talking. Needless to say, we were blessed with the warehouse group to have people of the quality of Sam and Sarah as part of the cohort. So we had a great first program, having a fantastic group of people to work with, and we're very excited about the program. We'd hope that today's provided some insight and inspiration for those who've been on the call to think about the program and whether it would make sense for their organisation or themselves to be part of it in the future.
Absolutely, and we'll be sending a follow-up post this session, sharing some information and also probably a recording of the session. And please do reach out. We recognise that an investment in leadership like this is an ongoing discussion, and so we're certainly open to any follow-on conversations with anyone who's been on today's call. So thank you. Hope you can all go out and start to get curious about being explorers for the weekend, and perhaps some of you will even take that a little bit deeper and think about how you can embed explorers mindset moving forward. So thanks everyone. Been great to have you online, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, guys.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Bye-bye.